I'm sorry, good afternoon. Wow, my apologies, good afternoon. Talking to students all morning, and I love them. Hi, guys, and they're here. Good to see you. Thanks everybody for coming. It's a really extraordinary afternoon for us to welcome your brother, Mark Morial, to Roosevelt House. How many of you have not been here before? That's a good amount. Great. One of the things that I want to say, to welcome you here, is that you are not just here for our event, but you are also in the former home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. You can apply for that. This is technically, if you haven't noticed, two mansions. His mother, Sarah, gifted the new couple, Franklin and Eleanor, this mansion as a wedding gift, and we should all be so lucky. But it's technically two buildings, and it was a way for Sarah to check in on the young couple from time to time. But it's a fantastic space where, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a moment, but it's a fantastic space where on the second floor is the library, where at a moment when, in those days when the president was elected in November, the inaugural was not until March. So they scheduled meetings, he scheduled meetings with his soon-to-be cabinet members on the second floor library, which is still there, still in, looks close to the way it did then. And the New Deal was sketched out in that room. So when they say the room where it happens, for us, the New Deal, that's the room where it happened. And we're glad to welcome all of you to this fantastic space. I also want to welcome our partner. By the way, if I didn't say it, I'm sorry, my name is Basil Smikle. I'm Director of the Public Policy Program here at the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute at Hunter College. And welcome on behalf of our interim president, Ann Kirshner, and the director of the Institute, Harold Holzer. And Jessica Newworth, my counterpart who runs the Human Rights Program, is here. She's teaching a class on the second floor, so she couldn't be with us right now. But I wanted to formally extend a welcome from Hunter College and all of our friends and faculty members. I also want to introduce our partner today, the president of the Wall Street Alphas, my chapter, Brother Lincoln Acosta.
Thank you so much, Brother Smikle. It is an honor to be here today with all of you. I just want to say on behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and the Wall Street Alphas, Zeta Eta and Eta chapters, we bring greetings to you all. It's been my pleasure to be the president of the Wall Street Alphas for the last year and change, and we have several illustrious members here with us today, including our general parliamentarian, Brother Adrian Stratton. We also have our immediate past president of our chapter, Brother Lino Solis. We have the chairman extraordinaire who helped put this together, this event together, our Committee on Impact chairman, Brother Dylan Gonzalez. And Brother Bryson Rose, the man behind the man right there. Thank you so much. We also bring greetings to our fratres and sorors of the D9 as well. I see my sister here. So I just want to say thank you for all the valuable work that you all do. We are in store for a wonderful discussion and on building your electoral capacity with none other than our brother Mark Morial. He's been an exceptional leader in our community for many years, and we are really chomping at the bit to hear what he has to say. So with no further ado, I will let you get to it, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, brother. I just wanted to mention a couple of things as a lead into this conversation. The National Urban League is no stranger to any of us. It's a historic civil rights organization founded in 1910, headquartered here in New York City, and with 90 affiliates serving 300 communities in 37 states in the District of Columbia. The Urban League spearheads the development of social programs and authoritative public policy research. What we like to do is always talk about the connection also to this building and to the Roosevelts. As America sank into the Depression, the Urban League was at the forefront of calling out the ways in which the Depression was negatively affecting African Americans, particularly in those days, a report that suggested that 64% of black men in Harlem were unemployed at minimum. And that as time went on, noting also that the recovery through the New Deal, as we may have learned, and I talked to my students about, the recovery itself was uneven because so many of the New Deal programs specifically and intentionally excluded African Americans. Right? And the Urban League also was there at the forefront, suggesting that and saying outright that the National Recovery Administration was either intentionally not hiring African Americans, or for the jobs that they did get, those African Americans were underpaid, significantly underpaid. One of our jewels, Eugene Kinkle Jones, the executive, for those that are uninitiated, one of our founders, the executive secretary of the National Urban League, of the Urban League at the time, was at the forefront of spearheading activities to make sure that presidents were being held accountable. He, interestingly enough, was initially registered as a Republican, different Republican Party at the time, a very different Republican Party. And in fact, in those days, most African Americans did vote Republican. But in a break from Hoover and other presidents at that time, he made a decision to support Democrats and actually voted Democrat in 1928 and in 1932, FDR's first election for president. And so we see one of our brothers, one of the executive secretary of the Urban League at the time, really at the forefront in trying to push an agenda for African Americans. If you have any questions or want to read more about that, you know, I'm the professor, so I got to do this. This great book called The Black Cabinet, written by Joe Watts, was a friend of mine, and it's a really outstanding book that talks about the role of African Americans in the federal government and related to the federal government, who are pushing presidents to be more responsive. And that's why it is really important for our brother Marc Morial to be here today. Former mayor of New Orleans, former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, an author of Decisions in Courage, a book of his speeches, a book that he co-authored with Sheryl Sandberg called The Gumbo Coalition. And for those of you who have streaming services, Max in particular, he is also featured in a documentary called Gumbo Coalition.
As a student of history, sometimes to get to the sunshine, you've got to ride through a storm.
We have to meet the moment. We have to fight back. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
Janet and I had worked for years.
I saw in Marc the importance of working across communities.
As mayor of New Orleans, we built a strong black and white, Hispanic and Asian community that I call the Gumbo Coalition.
We create a path forward that embraces diversity.
We fight for criminal justice reform, the right to vote.
We're working together to get everybody out to vote.
Everybody's not against you. All I can promise you is we're for you.
We now deal with the most extreme anti-immigrant policies at the national level.
We're living our happy American dream, and it was just ripped away.
This is a moment not of politics. This is a moment of morality.
So this is personal for all of us.
When people work together, big things can happen.
Lifting up the hopes and dreams of all of us.
I can be this loud for my children. I will continue to do it for others.
Making this a better country.
What's the best cure for the pain?
Love.
Thanks so much for coming, and I want to really get right into it. In Gumbo Coalition, one of the earlier points that you make is a certain feeling that came over you, or things that you were witnessing in that transition from Obama to Trump. how did you feel? What was going? What did you feel that as a leader of a national organization like the Urban League you had to take on?
I remember the moment of the inauguration of Barack Obama. It was almost a moment of nirvana. It's an ice cold day in D.C., like freezing. But it was a sunny day and a clear day. And I had been to multiple inaugurations, but I'd never seen a crowd like that. Because it was also a crowd that had a great deal of pride, a great deal of sense, a great deal of feeling that maybe this was a pivotal moment in American history that would allow us to turn, in a favorable direction. But gnawing inside of me was whether it would be followed by a backlash. Because the end of slavery, changes to the Constitution after a horrific war, which nearly tore this nation into two, was followed by a backlash and a reign of terror. The advances of the New Deal, the Great Society, and the Civil Rights Movement were followed by a backlash designed and orchestrated, Nixon's Southern strategy, the aggressive attacks on affirmative action, the demonization of those that benefited from the New Deal and the Great Society. Think of the pejorative characterizations of welfare mothers and lazy black men. Taught us that progress in America was always followed by backlash. So you hoped against hope that the Obama election would not be followed by a backlash, but lo and behold, I remember vividly in early '09, the so-called Freedom Caucus,
Right.
the Tea Party, stood themselves up as an organized, well-funded, strategic, carefully orchestrated backlash to Obama that was designed to appear as though it had spontaneity and organic impulses, but it was designed.
Right.
Those who know, look behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz. Look for the wizard. So, in many respects, on the night of the election of Donald Trump, my now 17-year-old daughter, who'd been following the election, was at that time 11 years old, 12 years old, had gone to sleep before the election returns came in. She came downstairs. She said, "Daddy, who won?" When I told her, she started crying. 11-year-old girl just burst out in just tears. And she had not been vocal about the election, but had been intently following the election. And I had right after that election, I had to go to the National Urban League Board of Directors, Board of Trustees meeting. And of course, when we got to executive session, the real conversation was, okay, tell us what this means. Interpret this moment. And I had to say, well, let's talk about worst case scenario. Let's talk about possible best case scenario. And the worst case scenario was realized even beyond my imagination in terms of the corrosive impact and the division and the stoking of division. You know, leaders can stoke division for political purposes. But most leaders, if they stoke it a bit, have an equilibrium that brings them back many times to balance because of a fundamental understanding that when you have this awesome responsibility
Right.
to lead a diverse nation, that you have to put the best interests of all ahead of narrow interests. And so I thought that the moment of division, what gave birth to the Gumbo Coalition was really the events in Charlottesville. And what we saw, so Charlottesville, as my mother reminded me, she reminded me many, many times, she says, I've seen divisive, racist, demagogic politicians my entire life. My mother makes 91. But they were sheriffs in southern counties. Low-level state legislators representing districts. Occasionally, a member of Congress who was wholly ineffective. A few governors, but I've never seen a president. Never seen anyone with such awesome power function with such division and hate. She said that, and so Gumbo really birthed itself as, it's one thing to say I am opposed to and am going to battle something. It's another thing to try to stand up an alternative vision, an alternative affirmation. And the Gumbo Coalition has its birth as an affirmative affirmation of a different vision. So it's a vision of, can we find some commonality on values, on principles, on approach? Can we find it across traditional lines of division?
I mean, two things with that, because in the documentary you talk about the importance of love, tolerance, and progress, particularly when you're talking to the young men who are incarcerated. And I always think about, as you talk about backlash, we were supposed to be in a post-racial moment. And now we're spending so much time talking about love, tolerance, and progress and the importance of bringing all those two things together. So I'd love to hear you speak about finding common ground on values through love, tolerance, and then getting 2 points of progress.
And you know, progress and tolerance isn't the absence of conflict. Can't confuse the two. Love and tolerance and common ground sometimes requires that you fight for them, because to me they're values more than a state of affairs. You know, values. The value of tolerance, the value of trying to find common ground and working together. So it's not this superficial kind of thought that, oh, we just respect the status quo, let it be, we all be peaceful and satisfied. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fighting for a future. The country is at a juxtaposition point in history. What is that history? So consider that the United States is one of the more dominant nations in the world. Dominant by what? The size of our economy, 25 trillion. Second largest economy, China's 14 trillion. No one else is more than 6 or 7 trillion. Dominant economy. Dominant military. And dominant as a, quote, Western democracy. But if you look at the history of dominant nations, dominant societies, they've either been centralized around an ethnicity, a religion, or the brute use of force. The brute use of force. You think about colonial nations. Colonial nations held themselves together by the use of force. Existential nations of the past. You could go to the Romans or the Greeks or the Ethiopians. They were conquerors. The use of force. And then they sought to impose on those conquered their religion, their values, etc. So what does that make for the United States of America? The possibility that you have a nation that can be, and I'm using the term dominant in the world, that has no majority ethnic group, no majority religion. That would be a first. And the test for America is, under those circumstances, can we have a constitutional value system that becomes the common element? The common element is not an ethnicity. The common guiding element is not a religion, a particular religion, but a set of values. Right. That's the test for the 21st century in the United States of America. And it's a serious test. It's a generational test. Test for leaders in politics. It's a test for leaders in the private sector. It's a test for leaders in the academy. It's a test for community and grassroots leaders as well. That's because if you don't get there, right, then the prospect is going to be continued acceleration of distrust, fear, conflict, suppression, and oppression. And I feel very deeply about that. I'm a son of the South. I grew up before the Civil Rights Act was passed. I was born in a segregated hospital. I went to school, the first year schools were integrated. Remember segregated churches? Segregated this, segregated that. But I was educated in the East, went back home to the South, and have now come back. I've seen this nation in a unique way through lots of different lenses, lots of different perspectives, lots of different seats. And I truly feel that the future, that we need to have a discussion and a debate clear-eyed about what the future of this country is going to be about and what it will take to get there.
You mentioned your mother, and then as you were talking about oppression, it made me think of a moment in the documentary where you said that she didn't allow you to use the segregated bathroom and it was important to not participate in segregation. How do you talk about that, and how do you translate that to young people?
It's interesting because my father and my mother said they didn't use the black water fountain, right? They were not using it. When we went to the public places, we were not using the segregated bathroom. They just refused. Where they could, they refused to participate. And I think that is what some of the civil rights, when they were, young civil rights fighters in the 50s and 60s, part of the resistance, in addition to protesting, in addition to litigating, was where possible, we're not going to participate. We're not going to use this. We're not going to go to a separate bathroom. We're not going to go use a separate water fountain. Where they could, they would resist. And I think it was interesting because I remember the signs. It was a Sears store, I believe. And you're like 3, 4 years old, man, you got to go. And your mama's saying, you will hold, because we'll be home in 15 minutes. And at the time, you're like, this just is not making any sense to me. But later on, you realize they were making a stand. However, in these times, we look back on, and I'll tell you this, because this is important. Like, I've had people pontificate to me, we're better off during segregation. Y'all ever hear any people pontificate on that? My first question is, did you ever live in segregation? Right. Well, not really. I said, well, you shut your mouth. You don't have any standing to give that opinion. Just like someone who says, well, prison's not that bad. You ever been there? Got to be careful opinionating about something you didn't experience when those who experienced it said, hey, it was hell. We tolerated it. We survived it, but it wasn't nice. It was hell, in fact.
And one of the things that also struck me as you talk about yourself as a young person, you went door to door in the documentary, and I know you do this regularly in your work. But you went door to door. You talked to a mother who had children in the house. You brought them outside, and you sort of hammered into them how important it was for them to go vote, although they were not 18 yet. So talk about the importance of creating a culture of civic engagement.
You know, when I grew up, and my father was an elected official and a civil rights leader, and one of the things I used to like to do is go with him on Saturday and campaign. And before he campaigned, we were going to civil rights events at the church, at the Union Hall, at the park. And in those days, that's what they did. They were in a constant education mode with people in the community. Knock on the door. You registered to vote. What's going on? Who else lives here? Let's talk, right? Conversation. You know how important it is. You know why this is important. So it kind of got built in. And it was one of the parts of when I was a young person, running for office, I really loved doing. Every Saturday, I'd go out and hit the doors, knock on doors. And so when we had an opportunity to do it, and one of the things you always want to do when you have an opportunity to do is talk to young people. Maybe it'll stick, maybe it won't stick, but just have a word with them. But it's also not only talking to them, it's also listening to them, giving them a little bit of a platform to talk about whatever it is that they want to talk about, right? And so we have this responsibility. Look, it's embedded into our fraternity. Yeah. See, it's embedded into our value proposition, which is to go back, give back, and engage. Sure. And more of us need to be more conscious about doing that, right? Need to be very, very conscious about how it's not about just talking to young people, it's about listening to them, hearing what they talk about. What's your dreams? What's your fears? What don't you like? And sometimes I say, what y'all don't like about adults? See what they got to say. And sometimes they say, yeah, I remember I used to feel the same way.
Well, one of my students earlier said to us, we remind her of her father. And I was like, wow, thanks for aging us. But I feel like that's I'm sorry, I'm not singling anybody out, but you know you are. But it is important, right, to consistently ask young people, how do you feel? Mm-hmm. And where you get your news. I find that I constantly am asking that question. How do you inform yourself, keep yourself informed about what's going on in the world, how you want to act with everything coming at us?
So, I get, on a daily basis, I get 4 newspapers. I still read newspapers.
Hard copy?
Hard copy.
All right.
And I have newspaper feeds and news feeds on here from all sorts of different news organizations. And then I subscribe to 20 African-American newspapers, 20 of them from all over the country. North Carolina, Houston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, New Orleans. And I page through them. I pretty much go through them with my recycling bin on the left-hand side, and I go throw. Sometimes I tear things out. Reading, listening to news. I'm a little bit of a news junkie. Mm-hmm. And through conversation and talking to people. I mean, you have to invest in knowing, invest in understanding, invest in knowledge, be curious about information. If you're in a leadership position, the worst thing to do is to be isolated in your own head, to be stuck. And I want to see what people that I might tend to lean towards agreeing with think. I'm very interested in what people I don't agree with think. I want to understand the posture of people's arguments, because in the world I live in, I have to be able to counteract, arguments and counteract rationales and be able to more clearly assert these thoughts and these values. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And I encourage people to, you might not want to be a news junkie, and I use the phone. I got stuff on the phone, and people, and the beauty today of this too is being able to stay in touch with people informally. People text you things, people email you things, people send you things. They send you photos, they send you clips, they send you quotes, they send you news feeds. I've got a lot of people on Google Alerts. You know, I've got 92 Urban League affiliate leaders around the country. I have every one of them on a Google alert because I need to, as best I can, I don't get a chance to go through all of them every day, keep up with what is happening, you know, in the world and have multiple sources of information and not become reliant on single sources.
Right.
You have to do that the same, and you kind of filter through it,
Right.
you know, and you don't take anything as being the gospel truth.
Right. So many of our folks are getting their news from TikTok. I'm not on it yet, but maybe I'll
I'm
be
going in that
convinced to be-
direction. I almost like feel like if I ain't on TikTok, right?
You talked about the value of what, the importance of what an elected official can do in terms of bringing about change. But we see, you know, so much division, so much anger, and I guess I know the answer to this question as you would your potential answer to this. Is there still a lot of value in being an elected official in this country and trying
Oh,
to
absolutely,
force
yes,
change?
because you have power. So think about this. Who can actually propose a law? Actually put it into the hopper? Only an elected person can do that. I was in the state legislature. I got to the state legislature. First time they were like, "What are you doing?" I think I introduced 100 bills. They were like, you're going crazy. I said, well, my odds will be good. If I introduce 100, maybe I'll pass 10, and I'll pass more than you, who introduces 4, right? But only an elected official can actually change public policy. A legislator can, city councilman can propose an ordinance, a zoning ordinance, a budget ordinance. A state legislator can propose state laws, state statutes, amendments to the budget. Governors and mayors and presidents can recommend. They can adopt executive orders and executive policy. You don't understand that being an elected official is not being a cheap celebrity. Some elected officials propose few laws. Others are very active in the lawmaking process. It counts. Who determines what happens with your tax dollars? Well, a budget that's passed by the New York City Council. New York City budget is about $100 billion. The budget of the state of New York is about $200 billion. Those legislators are going to determine how that money is distributed. What goes to education, what goes to hospitals, what goes to infrastructure. They're going to make those determinations. And so one of the missing things today is we are not teaching our young people about American government, democracy, and civics. So here we are. It's more important to know that than it is to know how to code, to know over there at Times Square. I tell this story all the time. They did a little walk-around poll. They asked people, name 3 branches of government. Somebody said federal, state, and local. And they came up with other things, Republicans and Democrats, and independents as branches of government. Name 1 Supreme Court justice. Who do you think won that one? Judge Judy beat him out. TV judge. I mean, you know, it's the world we live in, right? People were not well informed. Well, basic civics that I took, American government that I took, not being taught as a mandatory course in the schools, right? So how do you expect people to know what is the Bill of Rights? What does that really mean? What are the branches of government? What's the role and the powers of the federal? So some of this stuff is basic. Democracy is not a spectator sport.
That's right.
The civil rights movement, I say this, so what really was the civil rights movement? What was the first civil rights bill passed by the United States government? The first one was the Bill of Rights. But its application was not to all people. It didn't apply to women, didn't apply to black people. So from the beginning of the Republic, much of the battle was to apply these personal rights to all people through civil wars, constitutional battles, political strife. That's been the objective, so that everyone would have what the Bill of Rights talks about: due process, right to trial by jury, right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of religion. And the Bill of Rights extended includes the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments: equal protection, the right to vote, bans on slavery. Right? So why do we not place an emphasis on educating all of our citizens and all of our people and all of our young people about what this means? It's the foundation of the nation. But we don't do a good job. It's not a priority, and it needs to become a priority. Right there with reading, writing, math, basic science, it should be taught, because within it, you also can learn the history of democracy and how its benefits and fruits were denied to people, and how there's been a battle and a fight for years and years and years to apply it and allow everyone to participate in the vision of the country.
Now, if you don't mind, I want to go to the audience for one or two
great.
quick questions. But before that, what are you working on now that we can help you with?
So we're standing up in 2024 a messaging campaign, a call to action. And it's centralized. It's called the D3 campaign. So 3 Ds: defend democracy. Second D, demand diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of American life. And the third is to defeat poverty. So underneath those 3 Ds are voting rights, the freedom to learn. Underneath those 3 Ds are closing the wealth gap and the income gap. Under those 3 Ds is protecting affirmative access and affirmative action. So this is, we felt like we needed a easy way to capture this vision. And the D3 campaign is how we capture it, because it's memorable, it's applicable, and it's got a little ring to it. We call it not 3D, D3. D3. So it's gonna animate our work into this election year. And then we're launching our Reclaim Your Vote civic engagement campaign to try to register, educate, and mobilize people to participate next year.
Thank you, sir. I want to go to a couple of students first, because I see hands and I see hands. I have one of my students. I see you, brother.
Hi, my name's Abigail. I'm currently a senior. I'm majoring in political science and sociology, and I'm also in the public policy program. So you mentioned promoting civic engagement and democracy, but there also has been recently the loss of the third space, especially since the start of the pandemic, and you discuss the importance of keeping communication with the community as you door knocked with your father. But of course, I think there's only so much that can do to bring people when there is no common space. So how can we as a country begin to prioritize the expansion of the third space to build community that moves us forward?
And a third space refers to?
Sort of a space that isn't work or home, a common space that people can go to, like church, gyms, to community centers to communicate or speak to other local community members. And that it's a sociological term, and it's been tied to promoting democracy and civic engagement.
So how do we, it's a good, important question, because to some extent what used to take place in what one might call town hall meetings, community meetings, has migrated to Facebook conversations, Instagram posts, TikToks. So it's really, I would really be interested in your thinking about how we can restore some semblance of that is not just technology is great, but it can be very impersonal, right? I remember, when in my formative years, and that the town hall meeting or the community meeting was really an important place. And the other place that a lot of these safe spaces occurred was when people were so focused on joining community-based organizations, or and places of worship were one, and other types of organizations, and Alpha Phi Alpha and our local chapters or others, where people got together in person to discuss, debate, work, and plan, right? Work and plan. Like in New Orleans, as I grew up, there were so many of these institutions, from social and pleasure clubs to public housing residence councils to youth serving organization to organizations that were focused on arts and culture, because arts and culture were big, where people got together, they discussed it, they debated. I would really be interested in your thinking about how you can restore that, given the primacy of social media as a place to express ourselves. The minute we want to say something about a public policy issue, let's go to X, let's go to FB, let's go to IG, and load it on up, and my followers will see it, and my friends will see it. So I'm almost, am I turning the question around? I am, because I don't have an easy answer. I mean, I'm conceding, because I think about this too, how we can do it. So I don't know, real quick, if you had any thoughts?
I've thought about it before, and like one of the first things that come to mind is sort of further investment in like local community things like parks and like libraries. Like my local library was recently renovated, but that took like 4 years to finally finish. And sort of recently, I think there was a talk with like Queens Library, like losing a lot of their funding, and like libraries can be a great place to sort of promote events and like get the local community involved and to get young people off of their phones and like actually interact with people in real life.
So you think like public places, parks, libraries, public infrastructure, public
with heavy
facilities,
investment.
right? Investing in them. Good, great. I'm taking that away. That's
My
great.
student.
That's great.
We'll do 2 to 3 very, very quick questions, kind of lightning round in the debate, so to speak. We'll start here and then there and then there. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you, Brother Morial, for being
Thank
here
you.
present. Thank you to all the brothers and the folks that put this program together. I hear you with respect to the D3 programming that you have in your vision. And it harkens me back to the policy paper of our beloved Jewel, Eugene Kinkle Jones, when he graduated out of Cornell, when he highlighted those almost exact concepts: food deserts, education, election, the poor, and how society is impacting them. So when you look at that paper written 1910, 1911, to this program that you have now, are we making any headways? Do we actually ever conquer hunger and poverty in our society, the way it's structured? And is it just is it a Band-Aid approach, or are they real true solutions based on what he wrote back in 1910 and where we are today in the current programming?
So that's a very important question, because how everything has changed, but nothing has changed, is really the contradiction you're pointing out. So we like to think at the Urban League movement, and we borrow this from one of our advisors, that black people are like a caboose on a train. So is black poverty today less than black poverty 50 to 60 years ago? Yes. But white poverty is less than it was 50 to 60 years ago. And the relativity between the two is what hasn't changed. So approximately, if you look at 1963, 50% of black people were living below the poverty line, almost 25% of whites. You look today that maybe 25, depending on the state where we are in the economy, 25% of black people may live below poverty. and maybe 8, 9, 10 or 11% of white people live in poverty. So you sort of have this interesting juxtaposition that you have progress. Are more people, or more black people graduating from colleges and universities? Yes. But over the last 25 years, more whites have too. So it's the relativity that has not significantly changed. In some areas, the gaps have widened when it comes to wealth. The recession of 08 and 09 and the COVID recession have battered the small increases in African American wealth. And the Latino community, when it comes to economics and education, tracks closely to the black community, closer to the black community than it does to the white community when you look at social and economic conditions. The Asian communities are different because even Latinos, Asians are not a single, group of nationality, right? So we have, it's important to understand what numbers say. And so progress, but relative progress has been very, very stubborn. But for this nation, it's important to note, the most significant shift across the board in the last 100 years, significant shift, has been life expectancies. Life expectancies for whites and blacks, now in the last few years, they're now reversing a little bit. But life expectancies have increased for all Americans, but life expectancy for whites exceeds that of blacks. Life expectancy of women exceeds that of men. The lowest life expectancy is that of black men. So you gotta, when you have beyond a conversation, it's important to look at this, and this is why serious discussions in the academy, research, think tanks, media is important to understand that these things are not simplistic, in their manifestations. That there's a lot of, relativity. But guess what? Life expectancies for white Americans and black Americans since COVID, first time going what? Down. Backwards. Opioid, drugs, violence, right? Then cardiovascular, heart disease, those sorts of things too. But that creates an existential threat because we've taken for granted that with improvements in quality of life and improvements in medical care, that life expectancy was going to just continue to increase. But now we see and these are average numbers, and you still have more. It's interesting. You still got more people living to be 100 than ever before, but the medians are going down.
Two more quick.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Michael Myers. I'm the president of New York Civil Rights Coalition. My question relates to what's happening today on the streets of Washington, D.C., what happened on the streets of New York City yesterday. And that relates to black and Jewish relations and conflict. And when we, in Washington, D.C., we have Jews and their allies marching against anti-Semitism. In New York, we had Palestinian allies marching against anti-Palestinian issues, rights. Where in the hell has the NAACP been? Where is the ACLU that's supposed to stand for free speech and political protest and peaceful assembly when people's rights are being violated in the streets? Where has the National Urban League been? What have they said about these street demonstrations and the conflict between blacks and Jews and Palestinians? I don't hear anything from the civil rights organization.
And I'd like to have an answer, because if I had an answer, I don't have an easy answer to that. And I'm being blunt and candid. I don't have an easy answer to a conflict in the Middle East. I can easily have an opinion or perspective, but I'm also not there. I'm here. Yeah, you're talking. Yeah, but let me make my point, right? So I think people should have the right to peacefully protest. I think we'll stand up for the right to peaceful protest. I think what happened initially was horrific. I think the response has been horrific as well, right? That's how I feel, right? And I think that you're going to see continued protests in the street, and I think we should protect and defend the right of people to peacefully protest. And we'll do so. We'll do so, right? The ACLU is a litigation-based organization. The National Urban League is not, right? The NAACP does litigation to protect people, so people should have the right. But I'm not going to suggest to anybody that, I have or we have some answer to what is happening in a conflict that has thousands of years of history. Yeah. We've put out statements, and we've made statements, but this is what I got to tell you. It ain't the obligation of the civil rights community to respond to everything that happens in the world. And you see, that's where it gets up. I got people, do this, do this, do this, do this. My phone rings every single day about every single conflict and every single dispute, right? And I just don't feel it's my obligation or responsibility to respond in an instant, on a daily basis, to every conflict that's happening in the nation and any conflict that's happening in the world, right? It's not possible to, and some people will disagree with that, and they have a right to disagree with that, and they have a right to criticize it. But the question I ask a lot of them is, are you a member of my organization?
Well, I'll pay my dues. Was that telling me I should pay my dues, brother? All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamel Henderson, and I'm a doctoral student at the College of Staten Island focused on community-based leadership. So this topic is right up my alley, especially when you brought up civic engagement and encouraging people to run for office. In my current leadership research, I'm discovering that there is a counter-narrative between authentic leaders and establishment leaders who are in our communities pumping a narrative. So I wanted to know how practical tools we can use to support authentic leaders who do not have the backing of establishment politics that really want to make the change, but is constantly counter-narrative by the process of those who claim they want to come in our communities and do right, but are consistently doing wrong. How can we authentically support them?
I'm going to say that all politics is local. And the circumstances between various segments is not the same in every city. Not the same in every city. And there are many, many instances in cities. If you're talking about New York City, I'll tell you one of the problems in New York City is low voter turnout.
Yes, indeed.
And those who are, quote, establishment will always win in low voter turnout. Low voter turnout. How do you have, well, people say, well, I'm disaffected, I don't think voting matters. Well, that means that people that run against the establishment have a job and an obligation to try to inspire people and encourage people to be able to participate. How do you have an election in this city, municipal elections, where 30% of the people turn out?
Right.
How do you have elections where, 30%, it's a self-suppression? I got elected mayor of New Orleans, had 70% voter turnout. 70%. Now, the South was different. These elections had a crusade mindset, but had I had to run in an environment where 25% of the people turned out, I'd have never won. I'd have never won. So fundamentally, one of the fundamental issues with what you might say establishment leaders and authentic leaders is you can't get power if you can't get people to participate. You can't achieve it in this situation if you can't say, look, we have a different point of view, and I need to inspire people to be able to vote. I also will tell you, I don't like this ranked choice voting. I don't like it at all. Because if I decide for some reason that I have 5 votes, but I only like 2 people, and I vote for 2 people instead of 5 people. I've basically disenfranchised myself. But I'm just giving you a perspective, right? You know, somehow, somewhere, and this is New York, right? I'm not a New Yorker, but I am a New Yorker because I've lived here now for 2 decades. But I do not understand low voter turnout. You know, and people are disaffected. We don't like the candidates. But then when someone new shows up, they can't get people to vote for them either. I mean, this is really, really a challenge, you know, and you have public financing of campaigns here.
Yeah.
You know, which means you can run a low budget campaign. But if people do not believe, I'm saying, how do you believe you're not going to have power when there's a $100 billion budget down there at City Hall, right? And so this issue really kind of begs a bigger discussion. And I hear exactly what you're saying because I hear it all the time, right? And this is funny. I had a person who's an elected official in New York. I won't say who it is, won't say what they're running for. And they told me, they said, shh, don't talk about the election. I said, why you want me to talk about the election? She said, because we know who we want to vote and we don't want anybody else to wake up. I'm like, okay. I never heard that because where I come from, you know, the rally was we got to get everybody out. We got to get everybody to vote. We got to get the grassroots people to vote. You know, that's the only way we're going to be able to sustain our power. So you ask an important question. It is a long answer, but fundamentally, again, like she asked a question, I kind of turn back. What does it take? You know, and I say this, young people who are not happy with run for office. Get out there, get the platform, argue your case. If you only run because you're guaranteed to win, you'll never run. Well, I've got to make sure I can. No, you got to get out there and try.
Right. And just to say, if you are mayor of the city of New York and you do 2 terms, that is control of $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Just so you know. Brother, I said we'd be respectful of your time.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being with us. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Huh?
Wow.
I was born in New York, but I was raised in El Paso, Texas during the Second World War. Wow. They were lynching black people, and the Ku Klux Klan came marching through town, and they were celebrated. Blacks couldn't vote. Blacks couldn't ride in the front of the bus. There were white and colored fountains. There were restaurants they went to, and there were no bathrooms. The hate is just so deep-seated.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, and now we're talking about today. Well, when I was in El Paso, by the way, I was told, why didn't I go back where I belonged? Or where are my horns and tail? While 6 million Jews were being put into ovens or sent to slave labor camps. Today, before October 7, what happened in Israel, on the Upper East Side, and not the South, there was an increase of 400% of incidents, anti-Semitic incidents. I also, by the way, remember when there was the Freedom March in Mississippi, 3 people were killed, 3 young people. One was black, the other 2 were white Jewish men. You know, the hate hasn't gone away, and because of our former president, they've thrown in violence. And look what's going on in the college campuses now. I mean, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And I believe what you have said is very important in ways of dealing with this. But you can't ignore the fact that the hate is so deep-seated. Yeah. And with somebody like our former president, it's only made worse.
I think that we have to call out hate based on race, based on religion. We have to call out anti-Semitism. I am it really troubles me how people can have so much hate manifested in their souls. You know, and I'm being, you know, how people can hate people based on race, based on religion, based on ethnicity. It is so corrosive. And, you know, we have had, and you're right, we're involved in a project with ADL. The increase in hate crimes against blacks, Jews, LGBTQ, Asians, Muslims, has been horrific. And this is interesting. In this city, the largest number of recorded hate crimes are directed at the Jewish community. Statistics from, and so we do have to call them out. We do have to abhor it. We do have to challenge it. But we also have to preach greater understanding. And I'm sometimes lost, you know, at where and how and what places we can do this. So we should be able to do this. And, you know, I think we have to teach our young people. And disagreeing on politics should not be a license for people to engage in hate. You have to draw a line. I think it's a collective responsibility. It's an individual responsibility. But look, you're talking about the 45th president of the United States. I call him Agent Orange. My mother says, and I channel her on a lot of things because she's got a longer historical perspective, that he did more damage. He's done more damage to the body politic and the soul of the nation than we can imagine. The soul of the nation, the very essence of the nation. Because what he's done in many respects is sanction, license, and normalize hate speech, corrosive speech. You know, and people channel that. So I appreciate what you said.
And just as a reminder, he just the other day talked about his opponents as vermin. And we understand where that's going, right? And where it comes from. Brother, I said I would respect your time. We so appreciate
Let's do one thing. Let's thank Alpha Phi Alpha.
Yes,
let's thank Brother Lincoln, Brother Stratton, all the brothers, and thank you. We love to see you on the tube.
Thank you, brother.
Bringing wisdom. Y'all see him on TV? Yeah. So
Not my students, because they don't watch TV.
And he's available for autographs afterwards.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Do you mind if we take